So you're gonna record this, right? Because my husband wanted to enter, but he can't because he's at work. So he said, is it gonna be recorded so I can? Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're coming up right after lunch, so I'll give people just like 1 or 2 minutes just to get started.
Yeah. Are you in at the school? Are you at school? Or you?
No, I'm working from home today. How about you? Are you working from
Yeah.
home?
Yeah. I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, oh. Hello, everyone. We're just waiting a couple minutes for everyone just because we're coming after lunch. So some people might arrive 1 or 2 minutes.
So Katie, I'm checking. I'm gonna check the time, but if I was a little slower, then you will let me know, or I should just.
Yes, I'll give you guys, I'll give you a warning, a 3-minute warning, and then a 0, but the middle person is 14 minutes long. So I think hopefully I just wanted to tell you guys because we had one group that there was no time for questions because all the presenters went long and then they had to just end it or whatever. So just to allow time for questions too.
No.
Give it 30 more seconds and we'll get started here. Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the third session of our regular panels. And the theme of the day is sociolinguistics. And then we also do have one discourse analysis or interactional study that was added to this time. I'm Katie Clarkson Obidamaler, and I'm the moderator. And so today we have 3 presentations. 2 will be in person with the presenter, and then one person, because of the time zone, has recorded their presentation. So I'll be playing the video of their presentation. That's the middle presentation. Each presenter will be giving a 12 to 15 minute presentation. And at the end of the session, there'll be like a 10 to 15-minute Q&A. And I will be sending 2 messages to the presenters at the 12-minute and the 15-minute mark to remind you of how much time is left. And this video session is being recorded and we will share it on our website later as well. And I would ask you guys who are in the audience if you can post your questions to the presenters here on Zoom, except for our middle presenter, Hamza Rabul. You can post that on the Huva account, and I can quickly share my screen just to kind of show you guys like how to do that. So if you go here to our panel, you will come to our our panel here, and there's a Q&A here. That's where you can put the questions for the person who's not here. But for the people who are here, it's easier through Zoom, I believe. And without further ado, we will welcome our first presenter. Her name is Naomi Yamakawa, and she's from the University of Pennsylvania. The title of her presentation is New Normal Already Normal? Expanding Communicative Repertoire in a Language Class During the COVID-19 Pandemic.
Thank you. So, hi, everyone. So can I share the screen now?
Yes.
Can you see the presentation now? So hi everyone, my name is Naomi Yamakawa. I'm a first year student in the Intercultural Communication Master's Program, Educational Linguistics, University of Pennsylvania. Today I'm going to present my report, which explore in our daily life as a part of my project for a graduate course. The work is based on my experience during online and in-person teaching in fall 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed the way we live and interact. It is crucial for us to review changes, including virtual communication, which may miss multisensory interactions. In specific, it is important to understand how people have responded to changes in daily life and how the pandemic impacted classroom rituals, participation, and interactions. So this research is situated in the perspective of a communicative repertoire approach by Dr. Imes. Communicative repertoire is a collection of the ways individuals use language and literacy and other semiotic means of communication, including gestures, body language, and dress to function effectively in multiple communities. The study also draws on the concept of the production format by Goffman. People's interactions are framed by social and situational factors. I also look at Bromart, who used the term, the online-offline nexus, to describe the fusion of online and offline dimensions of social life in actual practice. Language not only creates identity for its speakers, but also identify their social group membership. So with a focus on changes in classroom due to the COVID-19 pandemic, my research questions are: 1, space. How have we changed the ways we use space in classroom? And 2, rituals. How have we changed the ways, how have rituals such as greeting changed with social distancing? And then 3, sounding. How have the use of language, including speech sounds and volume, the volume of the voice, changed during the pandemic? To answer the research questions, this study uses data from language classrooms. This ethnographic research includes observations, field notes, audio record, and pictures. I was teaching and at the same time conducting research, so it's participant observation. Here's a context. The language class is an introductory Japanese course that I taught in fall 2020 in a university located in a suburban area of Philadelphia. I met with the students 3 times a week. The class was in person on Wednesdays and Fridays and online on Mondays. So here are 3 categories for my findings: space, rituals, and language use and sound. So Brumad said our online and offline nexus is overlapping and indivisible. I found that online classes gave us an opportunity to build communities in a different way. So new communities were formed as a student could speak with different classmates through breakout rooms on Zoom. Another interesting observation in online space is that we found ourselves under surveillance. For instance, when I was teaching by Zoom, not only the student, but also their parent, siblings, roommate, and pets often join in class. Sharing space with people other than student during class affect how I behave as I became self-aware. The feeling of under surveillance is also because anyone can record or take pictures of Zoom screen without telling others. So it was more controlled and invisible. It was very hard to detect. I found that social distancing led to some awkward moments during the in-person classes. For example, 2 of my students needed to show me the draft of their project. One of them was bringing his project on his laptop and getting just closer and closer. And I was closer than 6 feet to my desk. So yellow line to show a distance was on the floor too. So in my mind, like, oh, no, just don't come closer. But I didn't want to say that to my student. So to keep social distancing, I have to wave my hand and then extend my arm to remind him social distancing. And Barry said, oh, please, you can stay there. So using slow gestures was my solution to avoid disruption. So in the end, we actually all laughed after the event. So I also found new interactional norms around greeting have been developed because of the virtual classroom environment. For example, because students enter the Zoom class individually, each student starts greeting and then talking with me first. So this behavior is distinct from a ritual in a regular classrooms where everybody greets at the same time first, and then we move to individual conversation. So another example is that in person class, students greet in the beginning and the end of the class in Japanese way by standing up and then bowing. So this is a ritual and a form called the kata, a concept originally from Japanese martial art. So after the class was switched to online format, in Zoom meeting, we no longer stand up, but bow while sitting on our chairs. So in Japanese culture, names are accompanied with honorifics to show politeness and respect. For example, the honorific sensei is added to a teacher last name. So that Yamakawa, my name Yamakawa, becomes Yamakawa sensei. So it's gender neutral. Another example is san, which is the most commonly used honorific, so that Yamakawa becomes Yamakawa-san. So students were new to Japanese culture well, so excited to be called by this new style. So they call their classmates by their last names each other, and then added san as a special title of respect. So a couple of students say that they like to call their classmate by the Japanese style. And it was very interesting that new ways of using naming was made by students even outside of the classrooms. So I discovered that this particular naming is a process of their new identity in our speech community. So comparing to the in-person class, I found that the students called names and use honorifics more frequently in our online classes. So this is because they usually have to call names in order to grab attention in online classes. It's used as a contextualization cue to signal that the students have questions. In an in-person class, students raise hands or use other gestures to grab the attention of their teacher and classmate. But during Zoom classes, they may not be visible in a small computer window, and therefore the fastest way to grab attention is calling my name followed by sensei. I also found new norms for leave taking. Sayonara means goodbye, and students in Japanese classes learn to say sayonara when leaving. However, sayonara is not commonly used in the daily life actually, and it sounds like leaving for good or farewell. So we stopped saying sayonara in class. Instead, we say stay safe after our regular greeting. In addition, we started waving hands, especially in online classes. On Fridays, my classes end with singing a weekend song in Japanese with body movement. And the students suggested to do it as they wish a happy weekend. We also build a new vocabulary. For example, when we use breakout rooms on Zoom, we started saying, see you in the main room. So I say in Japanese classroom, welcome back home, okaeri in Japanese, while students responded by saying, I'm back home, like tadaima. So we build a new vocabulary in online classes, which we don't use in our regular classroom settings. I also observed how we have changed language use with sounds and the volume of our voice. I often use a bit higher pitch to bring positive energy to students, especially at the beginning of the class. I did not speak louder because of wearing masks in person classrooms, but two students had the difficulties to learn how to pronounce particular sounds in Japanese because they had less chance to see my mouth movement. So we met on Zoom once a week for class, but we had office hours and follow-ups, and then we practiced to pronounce particular sounds. So teachers' roles increased, including social and emotional support. And the notable change is that after February 2020, I started saying, wash your hands, stay safe, or eat well at the end of the classes. So used to say that these phrases to children at school. So we stopped saying sayonara when we leave after thank you and arigatou gozaimasu, and then we say stay safe. So our research group in the graduate course, we observed hardship inflected language in common. So saying stay safe became a social norm, which makes sense to me as people really care for each other. So we use hardship inflected language to show encouragement or consolation. So through new ways of using space, rituals of greeting and naming, and the language use with sound and volume, I found that we are creating a new normal of interacting with each other. We are expanding new communicative repertoire through communities, including Zoom classes where we develop co-membership. So one of the examples is naming. It's a process of a student new identity and learning a different way of naming and using it together, develop the bond with classmates, especially during the pandemic. So it's creating a sense of belonging to the group. Such rituals not only provide student opportunity to experience a cultural norm, but also create co-membership and enhance student communicative repertoire to lead motivation for learning Japanese. So we often encounter disruptions and awkward moments. However, I believe these are signs to connect us together and to find the element of repertoires in different cultures and societies. So here I have a future question. So have these changes in space and rituals and sounding being observed in other language classrooms? And here's a reference. Thank you so much for coming and listening to my presentation. And if you have any questions or comment, please let me know. And here's my email address.
Thank you so much, Naomi. That was a wonderful presentation. Very, very interesting. We're going to hold off questioning until the end, but if something pops in your head, you can definitely put it into the chat of the Zoom right now. And as we mentioned at the beginning, this second presentation is going to be a YouTube presentation. And so as I share, sorry for the messy desktop a little bit, I want to make sure that everyone can hear the sound. So I'm going to share my sound here, and please let me know if you cannot. Our next presenter couldn't be here due to time differences. Hamza Rabul from the Institute of Advanced Social Research at the Public University of Navarra has sent a recording, which we will now show. And the title of the presentation is Secularizing Factors in the Spread of English in the Global South, Interculturality, Language Ontology, and English Language Teaching. Please raise your hand if you cannot hear, or please just interrupt. Okay, thank you.
Hello. It feels great to have this opportunity to take part in this conference and be able to explore other researchers' works. Well, this presentation is inspired by my doctoral research. I try to examine the influence of English on the cultural identity of both teachers and students in Morocco. So my doctoral research involved doing interviews and also classroom observation. So some of the insight from my doctoral research are included in this presentation, along with the findings of other studies from the critical literature on the spread of English in Morocco, and specifically in the Global South. So in this presentation, I will be discussing some ideas and assumptions related to the post-colonial status of the Global South and the concomitant linguistic dependency that situates local languages and cultures within the exteriority of modernity. So the objective is to examine the sociolinguistic situation of Morocco, a southern country, as it is influenced by the current manifestation of modernity, globalization, and neoliberalism. I shall also examine how the linguistic hegemony of foreign languages in Morocco is aggravating the marginal status of indigenous, or let's say local languages, which are, according to the institution, Arabic and Tamazight, in politics, social life, and education. Therefore, the main aim is to discuss the interplay of language, society, and culture in modern Morocco. So, an important element here throughout the presentation is the term of the Global South. So, the Global South, including the countries and, well, the Global South is not only a geographical region, but it's more or less of a situation or status of lack of, I would say, power. It's more or less of a status of the disposition. So the Global South, including countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, has been perceived as a post-colonial space that is still struggling with the enduring colonial structures. So, in addition to the economic and cultural dependency, the linguistic situation in Morocco is quite complicated, since although local languages are recognized in the constitution, they are increasingly marginalized, especially with the ascendancy of foreign languages. With the ongoing modern and neoliberal tendencies, the sociolinguistic situation of Southern context is further entangled with issues of colonial-like relations with northern spaces. So post-coloniality and linguistic dependency situate the global South within the exterior of modernity, according to Mignolo. Such conditions render northern perspective, ontologies and melodies as superior, while Southern cultures and ways of knowing are only alternative perspectives. For instance, American imperialism continues to stretch its cultural and linguistic hegemony by introducing English as a necessity to survive in today's job market. It's even argued that if you do not speak English, then you do not exist. In other words, language and discourse of neoliberalism represents English as a condition to economically operate in the global market, to the extent that without English, you're dead. So, Morocco is a multilingual country, where the official languages, as indicated in the Constitution of 2011, are Standard Arabic and Tamazight. However, the majority of Moroccans speak the vernacular, or Darija, which is a variation of Arabic that is influenced by French, Spanish, and Tamazight. With regard to foreign languages, French is still the nation's second language, pervading sectors of business, administration, diplomacy, and higher education. Also, Spanish is used in some places in the north of the country for several purposes. Unlike French and Spanish, whose presence in the Moroccan linguistic situation is due to colonial policy in the 20th century, English does not have a colonial legacy in Morocco. However, with a strong demand for a lingua franca brought about by the media, business, and globalization, the presence of English has consequently been furthered in Morocco as a global language. That is why it is safe to assume that as English continues to be increasingly spread in Morocco, it will probably get to the point where it will replace French as the country's second language. So, in the Moroccan context, there has been power struggle between local and foreign languages. While Arabic, Darija, and different varieties of Tamazight are perceived as the languages of local identity, culture, authenticity, and traditions, French and English are portrayed as high prestige languages, which represent modernity and status-bearing significance. So while foreign languages continue to pervade these essential sectors in Morocco, local languages are relegated to simply being representations of local heritage and culture. French is already dominating many important sectors of Morocco. That is why the spread of English in a country like Morocco might result in the marginalization of local cultures. Importantly, Morocco is another country that has been subjected to colonial administration by the French, which has resulted in dominance of Francophone culture in many aspects. This may mean that in a country that has been struggling with post-colonial positionality and linguistic dependency, it may be easier to perpetuate the linguistic and cultural norms of Anglophone countries as standards which less popular spaces have been trying to meet. This may perpetuate the exclusion of the voices and the complaint of the disenfranchised groups, since their rhetorical means are restricted and do not enjoy the same visibility as foreign languages. Such a practice would further place Arabic and Tamazight, which are the mother tongues, at the margins, and mark them as languages of citizenship, conservatism, and backwardness, while French and increasingly English imply economic prosperity, modernity, and secularism. Importantly, the historical position of Morocco as a post-colonial space that is situated within the global south may represent an additional reason for Moroccans and the state to favor other languages that hold international standing. With regard to English, which is the focus of this presentation, according to a study I published which looked at the perspective of university students, the cultural superiority of Anglophone spaces is recognized on Moroccan student language ontology, which refers to how a speaker perceives a user language to live another reality. Findings revealed that Moroccan university students expressed a willingness to relinquish their local culture in order to embrace an Anglophone one, which is usually American or the British cultures, that is more modern and attractive. This is even more convoluted if we consider that the non-Western learners might be adjured as inferior, and this is something which has been extensively discussed in the second language research. Especially by native teachers in the local communities. Teachers might be inattentive to the possible infiltration of student cultures by stemming Western by contributing to the continuance of Western hegemony and their inability to suspend native speakerism normativity. So presenting Anglophone culture as superior encourages ALT, assimilationist ideas, such as embracing American or British culture at the expense of the local one. That is why spread of English in a country like Morocco may result in the marginalization of local cultures. Morocco has been struggling with post-colonial positionality and linguistic tendency that ensued from the colonial administration of the French in the 20th century. That is why it is indeed easier to perpetuate the linguistic and the cultural norms of the Anglophone countries as standards which less popular spaces have been trying to meet. In the second article, I investigated how Moroccan language teachers, professors deal with the existing cultural concept of assimilation and the complexities of cultural globalization and the hegemony of other cultures, especially the U.S. Therefore, examined high school teachers and university professors' beliefs and practices. The majority of our participants implemented culture and interculturality teaching as the delivery of culture-related knowledge through discussing differences and similarities. This approach resulted in perpetuating cultural stereotypes and falsely confirming that teaching culture is entirely about the simplistic transmission of cultural knowledge. Moreover, only 2 participants whose practices did not feature representations that favor Anglophone cultures. That is a concerning finding, actually, considering how these English language teaching practices might contribute to the perpetuation of global power imbalances between northern and southern spaces. So, overall, Morocco's struggle to overcome its historical colonial challenges is further problematized by the linguistic and the cultural hegemony of foreign languages. The situation will be even more, aggravated since English has been increasingly spreading in the country, evidenced by, for instance, the high number of students enrolled in English Studies department at all universities. So Moroccan linguistic policy to incorporate English coincides with not only Morocco's struggle to face its colonial heritage, but also neoliberal pressures that render English a necessity. This is manifested in how the discursive power of the French as the ex-colonial code is still present, and English is gaining momentum along with the cultural ascendancy in modern Morocco. Therefore, it is indeed clear that English and French are highly important and significant in both formal and informal context. Overall, what can be inferred is that while the French is still important in the country, there are now multiple languages holding different levels of importance in various sectors. Local languages are gradually being sidelined and kept as representations of culture and heritage. With regard to education, the 2 articles finding make a case for the necessity to interrogate current English language education practice and theories that may include understandings and practices that present Western Anglophone thought and culture as superior. As long as non-Anglophone individuals, in this case Moroccans, are expected to embrace the cultural identities of the US and UK, subalternity is therefore further enforced. The additional burden of speaking another language and reflecting its cultural impact as native speakers lead to the subordination of non-Anglophone cultures and knowledges. That is why it is necessary to deliver English teaching practices that deconstructs and undermine the colonial-like linguistic relations of power as concomitant effects of the coloniality of power. Overall, I would note that Morocco should exercise more caution about the way they are dealing with the increasing spread of English. I mean, Moroccan individuals have been struggling with the pressure to speak French, and now with English, the pressure will be even more. So they will be more or less confused whether they will be still speaking the French as a second language or embracing English, which is the word lingua franca. So I hope that Moroccan officials will be careful about their linguistic policies, and they would also take into account how local languages and cultures play in this process. Um, I hope this presentation has been clear and provided some insight for you. Thank you for listening.
Okay, that was really interesting. And I think it's definitely a language situation that I think is very like relatable in many different contexts and countries and cultures. So it's a bummer that we can't talk directly to Hamza, but as I mentioned, you can leave your comments in the Huza app for him to get them answered. And thank you to Hamza for sending in the presentation. Our third and our last presenter is Kaltra Marcu from Temple University. And she will be presenting in Spanish. Since we are a linguistics conference, we accept all languages as presentation languages. And then after she speaks, we'll do the questions for the two speakers who are present, which is Naomi and Kaltra. So without further ado, the title of the presentation is in English, as I have it, or in Spanish as on the screen, an approach to the development of the second language through interaction and feedback.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Okay, my name is, good afternoon. My name is Kaltra Marco, and as Katie said, I'll do this presentation in Spanish. The title of the presentation is Una aproximación al desarrollo de la segunda lengua por medio de la interacción y la retroalimentación. El propósito de esta investigación es el siguiente. Los estudios de investigación en torno a la retroalimentación han reconocido la importancia de esta última, y muchos de ellos, como Mackey, Guest, Darhauer y Nasai, han razonado que la retroalimentación correctiva en clase tiene resultados positivos para el desarrollo de la comunicación en la segunda lengua. Además, se encuentran diferentes tipos de retroalimentación, como negociación de significado en forma de solicitud de aclaración, refundiciones, corrección explícita y repetición, que pueden ayudar a los alumnos a procesar la información y después producirlo. Sin embargo, para llegar a la fase de producir la corrección hecha por la maestra, los aprendices deben estar conscientes que hay un error en su respuesta y están siendo corregidos mediante la retroalimentación. Y en este sentido, Richard Schmidt, en sus investigaciones en los años 1990 y también 1995, analiza los rasgos relacionados con este proceso de notar, el cual consiste en reconocer si la conciencia consciente en el nivel de darse cuenta es necesaria para el aprendizaje de la lengua, si es necesario prestar atención conscientemente para aprender y si las hipótesis de aprendizaje basadas en aportaciones son el resultado de una percepción y comprensión consciente o de un proceso inconsciente de abstracción. Esta investigación, basándose en la hipótesis de interacción de Long de 1996 y en la de notación de Schmidt, usará la retroalimentación suministrada por la maestra como un instrumento para observar si en una clase dirigida por la maestra los alumnos notan las formas incorrectas cuando articulan y si son capaces de corregirlas. En otros términos, la presente indagación pretende encontrar la captación del error y la corrección de ello por el estudiante o la estudiante, ¿no? Tal entidad será implementada a través de las grabaciones en audio y las encuestas, las cuales ya precisan la utilidad de estas actividades para los alumnos. La importancia del presente estudio radica en su investigación teórica, pero también pedagógica, en la interacción maestra-estudiante y el impacto que este enfoque tiene en el desarrollo de la segunda lengua por parte del alumno. Es fundamental recalcar que muchos estudios se han hecho acerca de la relación entre la retroalimentación y la notación, como el estudio de Mackey, también otros estudios sobre la retroalimentación y la recepción, y tenemos el estudio de Leicester y Ranta, 1997. Sin embargo, en estos estudios no se hallan muchas investigaciones sobre la retroalimentación dada por la maestra, la notación y la recepción por parte del alumno. En correlación con esto, vale mencionar que muchos estudios tratan la notación y la recepción de la misma manera, argumentando que a través de ellos los alumnos pueden producir la forma correcta. Precisamente por este motivo, este estudio es importante porque argumenta que el hecho que los alumnos reconozcan el error no significa que haya recepción, como tampoco manifiesta que los alumnos entienden este error, ¿no? Entonces, para dar un poco más de la revisión de la literatura, los investigadores han sostenido que los comentarios recibidos durante la interacción conversacional facilitan la adquisición de la segunda lengua. Se ha sugerido también que la retroalimentación interactiva, según Guess y Ellis, está asociada con el aprendizaje de un segundo idioma porque anima a los estudiantes a notar los formularios de la segunda lengua. Un estudio de Ellis y Mackey en el año 2006 investiga las relaciones entre la retroalimentación y los alumnos instruidos en ESL, quienes observan el formulario de la segunda lengua durante las interacciones en el aula y su posterior desarrollo del segundo idioma. Los resultados apuntan a una relación compleja y positiva entre la retroalimentación interactiva en el aula, los informes de los estudiantes sobre la observación y su aprendizaje de los formularios de preguntas de la segunda lengua. Ahora bien, después de dar un poco sobre la revisión de la literatura y sobre lo que han dicho y investigado los investigadores en el campo, voy a entrar en materia y hablar un poco más sobre mi investigación, la metodología que he usado los participantes. En este estudio que hice, el propósito es responder a algunas preguntas. La primera es si los estudiantes notan la retroalimentación por parte de la maestra, ¿no? La segunda, si hay un reconocimiento de esta retroalimentación por parte de los alumnos, ellos se corrigen dando la respuesta correcta o solamente afirman lo que dice la maestra. Y vamos a ver ejemplos al final. Y la tercera, las actividades maestra-estudiante y la retroalimentación ofrecida por la maestra promueven el desarrollo de la segunda lengua según la opinión de los estudiantes, y ahí vamos a ver un poco la respuesta. Entonces, los participantes de este estudio fueron 13 estudiantes de una clase de cuentos hispánicos cortos de nivel 2000. Los 3 estudiantes hablaban inglés como su primera lengua. 11 de los participantes fueron mujeres y 2 hombres, todos mayores de 18 años. Para 2 de los alumnos, una mujer y un hombre, el español era su especialidad, ¿no? Para 5 de los estudiantes, 4 mujeres y un hombre, el español era su segunda área de especialidad. Los otros 6 estudiantes eran especialistas en otros campos como psicología, criminalística, inglés, periodismo. En otras palabras, todos los estudiantes habían tomado clases de español anteriormente. La maestra fui yo, en este caso, nativa de la lengua albanesa y estudiante graduada en ese tiempo ya en el 3er año, ¿no? En el Departamento de Español y Portugués en Temple. El estudio tomó lugar en el salón de clase en el año 2019, en la primavera, y consistió en 3 periodos de clase de 50 minutos. Se les pidió a los alumnos a través de un anuncio hecho en clase y a través del sistema de gestión de cursos de Canvas que se ofrecieran voluntarios para participar en el estudio. Después de que los 3 estudiantes aceptaron ser parte de la indagación, se les explicó el proceso y el propósito de la investigación. Ahora bien, las actividades se enfocaron en las lecturas pertinentes para cada clase. Un día miércoles vimos uno de los cuentos que fue El Nieto por Antonio Benítez Rojo. Y en esta interacción con la maestra, el discurso fue dirigida por ella, o sea, por mí en este caso, haciendo preguntas de comprensión para toda la clase. En los casos cuando no había participantes voluntarios, la maestra llamaba a un estudiante, así podía interactuar el estudiante con la maestra. Cada vez que había un error por parte del estudiante, la maestra facilitaba la conversación mediante los distintos tipos de retroalimentación, ¿no? A lo largo de estas conversaciones se usaron grabaciones de audio para ser analizadas después de la recopilación y observar si los estudiantes notaron estas formas de retroalimentación y si hubo una recepción por su parte. Otro cuento que se grabó, vimos otro cuento en la clase y grabé la clase, fue el cuento El beso de la patria, por Sonia Rivera Valdés, y ese día fue el último día de grabación y también hicimos las encuestas, ¿no? Ahora, para hablar un poco del análisis, el análisis involucró examinación de los tipos de retroalimentación por la maestra, las respuestas de los alumnos hacia la retroalimentación, examinación de las formas corregidas por el alumno, es decir, notar el error, y examinación de una posible recepción y examinación de las encuestas, ¿no? Primero tenemos la codificación de la retroalimentación ofrecida por la maestra, ¿okay? Y es esta tabla aquí. Entonces, los datos se analizaron a partir de la grabación de audio, observando los comportamientos de los alumnos en las diferentes interacciones con la maestra. Se creó una plantilla con las descripciones específicas de diferentes tipos de retroalimentación, y como podemos ver aquí tenemos negociación de significado, refundiciones y corrección explícita. Este signo quiere decir el número de la retroalimentación ofrecida por la maestra. Y después tenemos otra codificación, que es la segunda tabla, y aquí esto fue dividido en notar la retroalimentación, no notarlo, o si hay una recepción, que lo traduje como un uptake, ¿no? Si hay un uptake por parte de los estudiantes. Entonces, este fue la segunda codificación. Y vamos a hablar después ya de los resultados y de los números de los números según los resultados. Ya la tercera tabla es la codificación de la encuesta. En este caso, para la codificación de la encuesta que completaron los estudiantes, el último día del estudio se preparó una tabla que fue dividida en 3 categorías de actitudes para los alumnos. Tenemos actitudes positivas, neutras y negativas. Se les dio 10 minutos a los alumnos para completar la encuesta. Las primeras 5 preguntas eran preguntas eran preguntas abiertas, así podían explicar en más detalle su respuesta, y las últimas 2 preguntas eran preguntas de evaluar las diferentes actividades en una escala de 1 a 10. 10 era el más útil y 1 el menos útil. Entonces aquí, no sé si pueden ver bien la tabla. Aquí está. Entonces tenemos las actitudes positivas, neutras y negativas y las definiciones, ¿no? Entonces, y los ejemplos. Por ejemplo, algunos de los ejemplos, un ejemplo positivo: yes, teacher feedback is useful because I was able to apply her corrections and learn from them. Una actitud neutra: I prefer both activities, pairs and whole class activities, because with whole class activities everything moves faster, but it is important to have activities in pairs because you can help one another. And a negative attitude: I don't think the activities in pairs have enhanced my learning, ¿no? Entonces aquí tenemos diferentes tipos de actitudes. Ahora, pasando con los resultados, como ya mencioné antes, podemos ver que aquí tenemos los diferentes tipos de retroalimentación dados por la maestra y ofrecidos por la maestra, y lo que hice fue usé el método de conteo. Entonces estuve contando, y vamos a ver unos ejemplos, las veces que yo usé estos diferentes tipos de retroalimentación. Como negociación de significado, fue usado 5 veces por mi parte, ofrecido 5 veces, refundiciones 2 veces y corrección explícita 3 veces, ¿no? Y para pasar a la segunda tabla, para dar los resultados ya, si fue lo que notaron los estudiantes. Entonces, 6 de los estudiantes notaron la retroalimentación, 3 no la notaron, y por parte de 3 estudiantes hubo recepción, versus con 6 que no hubo una recepción, no hubo un uptake. Y aquí también lo que hice es puse los resultados de la encuesta, que de alguna manera cuando tenemos la actitud positiva, la mayoría de los resultados fue positivo, la actitud neutra, algunos neutros, y negativa hubo solamente 1, ¿no? Y la mayoría ya era positivo. Para darles unos ejemplos en la discusión, por cuestión de tiempo no voy a poder darles todos los ejemplos, tengo como 6, pero por lo menos ver algunos de los ejemplos. Y tenemos el primer ejemplo, la maestra, ¿qué piensan del cuento? ¿El nieto les gustó o no? Entonces uno de los estudiantes responde diciendo: es un poco confundido, ¿por qué? Entonces aquí en negro ya he enfatizado el error, que hay un error gramatical. Y en ese caso ya la maestra está dando una retroalimentación, y da una retroalimentación explícita diciendo: ¿quieres decir confuso? Entonces está enfatizando el error, y es una retroalimentación explícita. Después notamos que el estudiante sí nota el error y dice: sí, confuso, porque de momento no entiendo si es el nieto o no. Entonces, no solamente hay una notación que el estudiante sí notó su error y lo corrigió, pero también hay una recepción, el uptake, ¿no? Y otro ejemplo es En la misma clase, la maestra continúa diciendo, vamos a hablar un poco de este hombre, cómo es este hombre físicamente, cuántos años tiene y cómo se llama. El estudiante responde diciendo, tienes 30 años y tienes una barba, ¿no? Entonces aquí tenemos el error gramatical, porque el estudiante está diciendo tienes en vez de decir tiene, y entonces la maestra está dando una refundición dando su ejemplo y hablando de ella, diciendo, yo tengo 29 años y no tengo una barba, ¿no? Entonces el estudiante notó el error, pero no hubo un uptake, pero sí hubo un reconocimiento, ¿no? Entonces sí notó su error, diciendo, jajaja, ¿no? Y creo que no tenemos mucho tiempo para los otros. ¿Cuánto tiempo tenemos, Katie? No te escucho. Your microphone is muted. Can you hear Katie? I cannot hear her. Okay.
Oh, perdón, dije, I'm sorry, que creo que deberíamos cortarlo si es posible o si puedes terminar en como 30 segundos para dar tiempo para... Okay.
Sí, termino en unos 30 segundos. Solamente les quiero mostrar esto, lo último, lo siento. Y esto es algunas de las respuestas de la encuesta que los estudiantes dijeron cuando hicimos esta encuesta. Y en conclusión, este estudio se enfocó en la hipótesis de interacción y la denotación. Partiendo de la teoría sobre la hipótesis de interacción y la denotación, pude concretizar lo que se ha estudiado mediante la grabación de audio de 3 clases de 50 minutos, de cuentos hispánicos cortos y una encuesta. Lo que se puede decir es que sin duda la retroalimentación es importante para facilitar el desarrollo de la destreza comunicativa. Y solamente mencionar una limitación de este estudio es que hubo un tiempo limitado para el estudio para observar más episodios de recepción y poder implementar quizá otra estrategia más significativa para los estudiantes. Gracias, Katie. Thank you.
Gracias.
Sorry.
Lo siento. No, lo siento. I feel bad. We have such limited time with all of these. I feel like each session has had the same issue. But so to let you all know, Paul's keynote, I put the link into the chat so that you can go there. That starts at 1:45. So we just have just about 2 minutes for questions. I know there was one in the chat. Thank you for your presentation, Naomi. I'm especially interested in the idea of new linguistic features becoming relevant in the pandemic context language classroom. So I was interested in your mention of the new use of sorry, I don't speak Japanese, tadaima, when returning from breakout rooms. A question for the Q&A time. I wonder whether there were any other examples or topics, vocab that students requested to cover in the class as a result of the new normal. For example, in my Kurdish class, recently we learned like thumbs up, thumbs down in relation to Zoom. Naomi? I think you're muted, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you for the interesting questions. Okay, so yeah, we have different languages, and the first one I would like to say, always ask, are you good? So we are good. So that's in Japanese is daijoubu, daijoubu. So yeah, we are good. It's instead of saying like I'm fine or cheerful, so we say daijoubu, I'm okay. So we start saying, and also the end of class, please wipe in Japanese, please wipe on classroom. So it's usually we use this word in in-person classroom. So that's why we say like, please clean up like a wipe. So we don't use it, we didn't really use this word before, but now start using. So wipe is fuku, and then please and kudasai. So fuite kudasai. So fuite kudasai and daijoubu. And also when we do peer work, students tend to pull their chairs, even they had their seat 6 feet separate, but still they try to put their chairs and get closer. So I said, please be separate a little bit, have a distance. So like 離れて is like be separate. So yeah, these words we didn't really use, and then now start using more.
Awesome. Okay, I'm so sorry to have to cut this off short again, but in the Whova app, I think all the questions can be placed there. And if the speakers can go to the Whova app and answer these questions, thank you so much to all three speakers. These were so interesting, and I had a couple questions too, but we just don't have time. So please put them in the Whova app, and then the speakers can respond, and we can continue the conversation that way online. And then here is the link to the next, the keynote that's at 1:45. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry for the cutting off. I'll stop the recording.